Great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the great testimony we've had today and all the experts being here. We need your help badly. I noticed, Ms. Miller-Osborne, you said you appreciated the fact that this committee has worked in a bipartisan way to both identify the problem, and you said showed interest, and to actually pass legislation. That's our goal. You know, this is not a partisan issue. This is one that's a threat to all of us if we don't figure out a better way to deal with it. And we have this immediate issue of Log4j, but it's not new, as was said repeatedly. And we need to, among other things, you know, use best practices. You mentioned the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. That stemmed from an authority that we here in Congress gave CISA. And I'm glad to see you think it's working. So do we. And we think it's brought the private sector in ways that are appropriate to provide those best practices. In terms of best practices, Mr. Arkin, I want to talk to you for a second about what Cisco did and how it applies to some of your customers. First of all, does your company have a sense of how many and which of your customers have applied the patch to Cisco products that they own?
So when it comes to the question of patch update adoption, when it comes to our on-premise products, the big focus for us is to make sure that we're communicating transparently about the status of each of the products that we have and is it vulnerable or not. And then regarding patch availability, how to get that patch and apply it. And so we were able to ship all of the updates relevant for this Log4j vulnerability for the on-premise products that we ship to our customers within about 2 weeks of when the vulnerability was first publicly announced. Once we get that information out to our customers, for the on-premise products, it's up to our customers to then take that and apply it within the patch maintenance windows that they have according to their risk profile of how the technology is deployed in their environment. And that's not something that we track. It's something that we make available to the customers, and then it's up to them to then take it and apply that where it makes sense within their risk management framework.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the challenges here is that my understanding is companies have to develop their own patches for their own products, correct? So there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach here. And my hope is that Cisco will continue not just to provide those products, but to encourage people, you know, to use them and help them through that process. How long did it take for you to identify potentially vulnerable products?
So when the information was first released, we worked with our internal insights into our source code and the products that we're responsible for maintaining, and we develop an understanding of where we have Log4j within the code base of the different products that we ship. In some cases, the instance of Log4j was bundled into a larger component, which was upstream from us with some supplier in between. And so in each of these cases, we need to understand where does Log4j exist? Is it in part of the active code path, or is it a dormant dead section of the code? And then where it's relevant, where do we need to make those fixes? We got the information about Log4j Thursday night, which I think is December 9th. And then by the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, we had a good picture of where we thought Log4j was relevant within the code base. And we maintained a web page publicly facing where we were providing updated information for our customers so they could see what was confirmed as not affected, confirmed vulnerable, and if it was vulnerable, what the patch schedule was, and if the patch has been released, where to go download it. And so I'd say within about 72 hours, we had a good sense of where we needed to make changes within the code base.
You were already patching within 72 hours?
Some products, yeah. Some products were patched within 48 hours. And within 72 hours, I think we understood where all of our patch requirements would be. And then it took us another 10 days or so to get those patches published for our customers.
Well, your experience needs to be applied elsewhere, and that's remarkable and fast. And my hope is, again, your customers are getting your assistance to do it that quickly as well. With regard to cyber threat coming from Russia, Ms. Miller-Osborne, Russian cyber attacks against Ukraine are a threat right now. We also have threats here in the homeland. We've seen this, you know, over time with regard to Russian-based cyber attacks. Actually, when I was in Ukraine recently, just a few weeks ago, I was briefed by members of the Ukrainian government about some of these attacks and their need to bolster their cyber defenses and resiliency. Let me ask you this. You've just put a report out on the cyber threat landscape between Russia and Ukraine. Can you give us a very brief summary of what that report said and also provide that report to the committee?
Yes, we can totally provide the report to the committee. The summary would be that due to the ongoing situation, we decided to take a look at what is historically one of the more active groups attributed to Russia, which is Gamaredon. And what we found were active campaigns targeting entities in the Ukraine over the past 90 days trying to compromise them and get malware into the systems for the likely purpose of espionage. Because we found this recent activity, we worked very closely both with our JCDC and other government counterpoints and within the intelligence community to make sure they were aware of the same thing that we were seeing. And we also worked closely with the Cyber Threat Alliance, which we're a founding member of. It's essentially a group of competitors that have recognized that sharing threat intelligence between organizations is critical to really get an understanding of what the adversaries are doing on a global scale. So in advance of the publication, we shared it with everyone that we have partnerships so they could take action and already have protections in place and be working on it. And then we went ahead and released it to the public so that everyone or anyone that might be in this kind of position could make educated decisions on what they needed to do to be safe. And we provided, actionable IOCs and data from attacks happening over the last 90 days for them to use for hunting in their own environments.
Well, that's very helpful, I'm sure. I mean, look, that's concerning what you're saying about these attacks. And let's just be clear, you're talking about critical infrastructure in Ukraine. Is that accurate, as well as governmental entities are under attack, cyber attack right now?
Yes, governmental organizations and other critical infrastructure.
Yeah. And one serious concern we have, of course, is the possibility of more cyber attacks against the United States in response to the United States doing things like applying sanctions, which many of us believe are necessary, particularly should Russia make a big mistake and invade Ukraine. What can we do more here to be sure that those potential cyber attacks on critical infrastructure find a coordinated both defense and offense on our side?
From my perspective as a threat researcher, what we're doing with the JCDC and the partnerships there is really critical to make sure all of the stakeholders come to the table to be able to do exactly what we did for Log4Shell, where we were able to convene quickly with all of the people that needed to be at the table and share actionable data for these sorts of things as it moves forward. For anything else past that, sanctions, things like that, that's totally not my area of expertise. I leave that to the lawmakers. I'm very focused on being able to make sure that we can share actionable intel with the organizations who need it to be safe.
Mm-hmm. Well, my time's expired, but I want to thank you for what you're doing every day in your organization. And my sense is that we need to be prepared, much better prepared, not just because of these existing issues we're talking about today with regard to open source software, but with regard to the reality that we're going to be subject to more and more cyber attacks, and perhaps an intense effort at doing that from Russia that we need to be ready for. So thank you for working with the governmental sector and also with the private sector and with this joint cyber defense collaborative to ensure we have that capability. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.